Hello and welcome to another Shutter Chat. This week we are going to be talking about large format and large format photography and why should you or why should you not shoot large format photography. Well, there's a lot of people that talk about all of this photography, buying new large format cameras, whether they should go with a 4x5 or whether they should go by a 5x7 inch or they should go by an 8x10. Let me say this. The size of the camera is going to be dictated by the size pretty much of whatever the negative is that you're going to be shooting. So if you're shooting an 8x10, you'll be shooting an 8x10 negative, sheet film negative. So that negative is going to cover 8x10 space. So it's going to be a pretty large camera. If you're shooting, 5x7 on a 5x7 camera, then you're going to be looking at maybe a smaller camera with a 5x7 negative. And then, of course, the smallest is the 4x5, and there's a 6x9. But the 4x5, you're going to be shooting a negative, it's 4x5 as far as inches are concerned. View cameras came out many, many years ago. They really were the earliest, I think, form of photography or pieces of equipment used in photography. In fact, Garry Winogrand had talked about the large format, camera, and talked about it being an archaic machine. So even back in the 1970s, I think it was being considered to be rather an antique when it came to doing photography. But with the film resurgence, we've seen even more so now. There's an interest in going larger with film negatives, and there's now something called ultra large format, which is even larger. And to me, that would be, just for my purposes, just really out of the ballpark. When you're shooting large format, some of the reasons that you would shoot large format is that you want the larger negative. You maybe want to make what they call a contact print, and that means that you can take that negative and put it down over a sheet of darkroom paper and run a light over it, and then of course print that negative directly onto the photo paper in the darkroom. And that gives you what they call a contact print. And I can say the contact prints are beautiful. The larger they are, they're sharp. There's no enlargement aspect when it comes to that. But there's also the cost. The larger you go in your large format, as far as size of sheet film is concerned, it's going to cost you more. So a 4x5 is going to be less than a 5x7 or 8x10. But as you move through 5x7 and 8x10, you're going to start to see the prices escalate, even in black and white negative film. And I always warn people to check out the prices of the film before you get into that format. Now, if you're doing large format, for a career, and you're getting paid to do it, then by all means, then you can factor in the cost of the film. You can factor in the cost of the printing paper and so forth. But again, it goes back to one of my premises is, how large are you going to print? And that's something I always say. How large is your print going to be? And would you really need large format to accomplish that? There are a lot of different focal lengths. There's a lot of different lenses you can get for them. They're great in that respect. With large format, you have an advantage, the tilts and the swings. You can bring things into focus in the near and in the far together. You can correct for the tilts in architectural buildings. If you're doing architectural, maybe a landscape photography, you can make things appear straight and parallel. Great for product photography. So there's a lot of advantages to large format. But there are also the costs to doing it as well. Sheet film, again, it's not cheap. There are some low-cost alternatives out there, but even those can be costly. It does slow you down. It does slow you down. You're taking one or two shots, whereas you might with a 35 millimeter medium format camera take half a dozen to a dozen shots. The quality is there, but also the price is there, the cost is there. Lenses are out there. Most of them are going to be on the used market. There's a lot of new makers of large format cameras. There's a lot of existing large format cameras out there. I use a Toyo 45A and a Takahara 4x5. Both of them are great cameras. But you have to consider the cost of operating those cameras. And there are roll film backs you can get that can lower the cost, which could let you make your prints 6x6, 6x7, 6x8, or 6x9, rather not prints, but negatives. And they give you still that same, perspective control and so forth that you would get out of large format. When you're doing large format and you're using a roll film back holder thing, you can put it on there. It's going to save you some money, and yes, it will do that. But you're going to have to use a mask and to mask out your viewfinder, your screen, so that you can be able to compose for the size of film that you're using in that holder. Some of the other disadvantages I'm going to point out are that when you're taking these photographs, sometimes it's hard to see the screen. You're going to have flipped images in your screen. They're not going to be like a 35 millimeter SLR where everything's upright and correct. You're going to have to adapt to being able to see through the ground glass of a large format camera. So that's another situation you're going to have to look at as well. Exposure is important, and in large format, when you've got all that bellow extension going out there, less light is getting in from the lens to the film, so you're going to have to make those adjustments in your exposures so that you get the accurate and proper exposure. Because when I started large format, I had a lot of film that was underexposed and overexposed, and getting that exposure right is going to be critical. And each piece of film out there, or sheet film, is going to be costing you every single time you make an exposure. So that is another thing you have to look at as well. But the advantage is that when you get that print or that negative and you are able to make that print or that scan, you're going to be satisfied with the detail that you can get out of a good, well-made negative on a large format camera. I mean, they are great. Again, they're going to have to be usually used on a tripod mounted. And one of the issues that a lot of people don't realize is really getting a scan out of a large format, film is not always the easiest task. Let me tell you this. Most of your scanners out there, again, are going to only be able to scan 35 millimeter or medium format. 35 millimeter or medium format. A lot of the Epson flatbed scanners are going to be a cutoff, with medium format roll film. They don't have the capability of scanning 4x5 or 8x10. So that's something to think about. You can get 4x5 scanning of sheet film in the more expensive models of the Epson flatbed scanners. But again, that's going to cost you more money. So that's something to think about. And then of course printing from, large format. Do you have an enlarger, or can you get an enlarger that's going to be able to, print that larger massive negative, that 4x5, 5x7, 8x10, or even, ultra large, format. So those are some of the considerations as to why you may or may not want to go down the rabbit hole of shooting large format. And let me tell you, I used large format a lot back in the day. But after the last couple of years, really, with time and everything and the constraints, I really haven't used the large format. Maybe once or twice a year is when I break it out. And honestly, it probably sits more, that camera does, than really being used. So, again, that's just something to think about. So, again, just hope this is helpful in your decision in whether or not you should get into large format when you're exploring there. That's all the time that I have this week, but again, join me again next time, and until then, later.